This video is rated B for you'd better back on out of here if you don't want spoilers, buddy. In a world of magic and monsters, life can be odd, even at the best of times. Creatures take a variety of different forms, from beings as massive and mighty as a behemoth to as small and unassuming as a crab. Life manifests in a variety of ways, and there are even creatures that can be artificially conjured on top of that. There's so many different ways to define life in a world this diverse that some don't even bother trying. But there is one thing that many mages and researchers agree on, something that separates an arcane entity from your common beast, and that is the presence of a soul. Research into souls and spirits is tenuous at best, and is technically still an underdeveloped field of research. From the ether of souls, new life is born, and as such, they are considered sacred. But what happens when a soul is entirely spent? When every last drop of ether is consumed? Gather around, my friends, for today we'll talk about one of the most harrowing sacrifices made in the star's history. Today we'll discuss the creation of Hydaelyn. First, let's address what little we know about the nature of souls. There are a variety of creatures and people that occur naturally upon our star, and as such, they gain a soul from the ethereal realm, which is also known as the life stream. The soul is the primary source of energy and ether of that entity. To suddenly lose the ether tethering their soul to their body is to die. And when a creature dies, that soul will most often return to the ethereal realm given enough time. And eventually, there will come a time where it emerges and is born once again. This is what's known as reincarnation, a cycle of life and death happening over and over for as long as the star has existed. Many cultures that know and understand this cycle place it above most things. They venerate the star's power over life and death, often seeing the cycle as something holy or sacred. This is why spell schools like necromancy are often vilified and considered taboo. To tamper with the natural cycle of souls and spirits is to disrespect life itself. But, as I stated earlier, research into souls is ongoing. While we can observe and understand this recycling of spirits over the course of thousands of years, there are unique and rare instances where souls will appear or manifest on their own. These things are not considered normal or even natural sometimes, and yet it happens anyways, baffling researchers to this day. But nevertheless, it's understood that when a soul-bearing entity dies, its spirit will naturally be drawn back to the ethereal realm. But that was not to be the fate of the many spirits in ages long past. That was not the fate of those who became Hydaelyn. Hydaelyn is an entity with many names and titles: the Elder Primal of Light, the Will of the Star, the Mother Crystal, and more. But in reality, she's nothing more than a primal conjured through the mass sacrifice of many beings known as the Ancients. The society of the Ancients is fascinating, as they reached what many would consider to be the pinnacle of social advancement. Every ancient was an individual, a person with their own thoughts and dreams, and yet they didn't place themselves above their fellows or their society. They believed and subscribed to the concept of something greater than one's self. But above all, they believed in the prosperity of the star. However, discussing the nuances of their culture is a tale best told at a later date, if you so desire. Suffice to say, their view on life was much different than ours. They didn't see death as a cold and final destination. They understood and trusted that the star would reclaim their soul, and one day they would be reborn again. To them, this cycle was beautiful, and with the fear of death all but dissolved, interesting social dynamics began to emerge. The ancients viewed the act of creation as a blessed thing, and many social norms were developed around their ability to manifest things purely out of ether. For example, it wasn't unheard of for an ancient to sacrifice their life in order to create something they saw as truly remarkable. Despite the sacrifice, their soul would simply return to the lifestream one day, mayhaps re-emerging alongside their previous creations at a later date. But this idea of a creative paradise was not to remain forever. The final days would eventually be upon them, an event that shook the ancients to their core, ruining their lives, destroying their creations, and throwing the star itself into despair. Their answer to this catastrophe was the most powerful entity they could ever conjure. Countless ancients would offer up themselves in ritual sacrifice, and the result was Zodiark. Zodiark was so powerful that he was able to successfully rewrite the rules of ether, ending the final days and banishing the unseen force that was tampering with their world. But therein rested the problem. Zodiark was indeed powerful, and some ancients saw him as too powerful. Not only that, they realized that Zodiark's might was not a permanent solution to the final days. And many ancients would disagree with the repeated sacrifices made in Zodiark's name. Chief among them was a woman named Vana. She opposed this idea, and many ancients would take her side. Those who supported Vana believed that to sacrifice over and over to Zodiark was to play God, to place themselves and their society above the star itself, above life. Normally, this is something their society would vilify, but the trauma and fear created by the final days had compromised the minds of many ancients. Zodiark was not the answer to their problem, and to some ancients would no longer be tolerated. Indeed, they would need to find another way, another power to contend with a living deity of their people's creation. Such tremendous power needed to be placed in check, and so their response to Zodiark was Hydaelyn. But this sacrifice would be far more grim than normal. Vana was resolute, prepared to do whatever was necessary, but she never acted alone, not even once, not really. She had the support of many ancients who both admired and respected her, and if not her, they believed in the star. Eventually, the plan would be put into motion to conjure Hydaelyn, but her summoning was different than Zodiark's. While it's true that countless ancients sacrificed themselves to create Zodiark and bestow him with great power, their essence still lingered on as part of him. Simply put, if Zodiark was to be undone, their souls would be freed, all of them steadily returning to the ethereal realm. But that was not to be the fate of those offered to Hydaelyn's creation. And I quote, "Vana's faction thus resolved to manifest an entity capable of shackling that power. To have any chance at defeating the nigh-omnipotent Zodiark, however, the sacrifice must be absolute. Not even their souls would remain." Those who offered themselves to Zodiark would have the chance to see their world once again with new eyes eventually. But not so with Hydaelyn. Vana and all the ancients who pledged themselves to her choice would be consumed entirely. Their very souls were converted to fuel for the summoning, and they were snuffed out of existence. Never would their essence be seen again. They did not simply make a sacrifice for the star, they embraced true oblivion in the name of a world that might not remember or even thank them. If death intimidates someone, then this would surely make them scream. But despite all of that, they summoned Hydaelyn regardless, becoming a living entity of light and hope for the star. Thankfully, their sacrifice was not in vain, as Hydaelyn had awoken, and with the will of those selfless people fueling her existence, she understood her purpose and defeated Zodiark, sundering the star itself in the process. Zodiark was now a shell of his former self. His core was gone, and not only that, but all the energy and souls that made up his very being was now sundered into 14 distinct copies. 13 new worlds and the source to bind them. At some point, Hydaelyn would go on to create facsimiles of some ancients that made the ultimate sacrifice to become a part of her. While the ether that made up their souls was entirely gone, the ether composing their memories likely wasn't entirely dispersed, not yet. With it, she created entities in their image. Some of these beings would become known as the Watcher and the 12 gods of Eorzea. However, they know what they are. They understand that these memories aren't technically theirs, and yet they carry and honor them all the same, attempting to assume similar roles as to those they've been modeled after. In fact, it could be said that Hydaelyn creating the Loporrits was yet another attempt at celebrating those who loved and sacrificed for the star. Because there are very few who adore the world and its people more than these fluffy little builders. But with Vana serving as Hydaelyn's core, she would always remember her purpose and her duty. For thousands of years, she labored to ensure the star would survive, and that life would thrive despite the chaos created by the Ascians. But regardless of the many souls used to power her creation, it was still finite, and she likely refused to sup upon the ether of the star like some kind of parasite. The day would come that she would be made to rest, dissolving the last of her energy and disappearing completely. It's tragic, in a way. Vana and her companions will never get to see the world they saved, never get to enjoy the fruits of their labor. They chose oblivion to hopefully undo the choices of a madman. But I like to think that they succeeded, as a brand new dawn is about to shine upon the world of Hydaelyn. But with that tale told, that will be all from me for now, though I will leave you with this. I'm well aware that this world's original name was Aetheris. It's indeed a lovely name, full of promise and potential. However, I continue to call the star Hydaelyn for 2 reasons. The first is a professional one. Hydaelyn is the commonly accepted name for many people and cultures across the world. The name Aetheris isn't exactly well known outside of certain circles and would confuse most people. But the second reason is a personal one. I call this world Hydaelyn to mark the many sacrifices made in the name of the star, to remember souls that will never be seen again, and to honor all the good and bad that came from every astral and umbral era. Something to think about. But as always, I hope you have a lovely day. And stay safe, my friends. Thank you all for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe and share this with your fellow adventurers? With your help, I'll try to reach out even further and bring even greater stories to you. Although, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my biggest contributors. A grand thank you to Amina Viltaria, Travanchet, Sage Mouse, Sinalv Bagel, and Cezanne, with an additional nod to the scholarships on screen. Links to things like my Twitter and that of my channel artist Caddy can be found in the description. Thank you all for your viewership as well as your support, and I hope all of you have a wonderful day. Class dismissed.